Kyle Trask. We're doing our series, albeit a very informal series, as we continue now tonight with Kyle Trask about the most important figures in college football. Remember we talked about Josh Gaddis the other night. It's not just players, it's figures. Josh Gaddis is the offensive coordinator at Michigan. I think for obvious reasons, he's one of the most important figures in college football this year. Meaning, whatever we get from him is going to have a huge ripple effect across the sport. This Sunday, I think we're going to talk about Clay Helton, if all goes according to plan. And so tonight, I wanted to talk about Kyle Trask for just a second. I did a couple of radio hits today, and I do several radio hits during the week. And I've been asked this question a lot, so I'm going to ask you now. You can play along with me. How would you answer this if you were on radio? Someone said to you, Josh, or in your case, audience member? I'm looking in the chat. Melissa, David, Tyler, Vols Talk, Brant, Iowa State fanatic. Who is the best quarterback in the SEC entering the 2020 college football season? How would you answer that? Because if the answer is not Kyle Trask, then you are going off potential. And I don't have a problem with that, but aside from Kyle Trask, like who's really proven down here? Are you going Kellen Mond? Is that the direction you want to go? Bo Nix has the potential, but it's not necessarily fully proven potential yet. Jamie Newman's done it at Wake Forest, but there are several reasons to at least question what we're going to get from him and them out of Georgia this year. Where else are we going? I think it's viable that you could go to Alabama because you know Mac Jones is not a new starter and he's going to be surrounded by an army of talent. But you see what I mean by this. It's almost like a gotcha question. It's like a trap question. They want you to say anyone other than Kyle Trask so that they can press you on it. So I think the answer is, well, at least as it stands right now, it's Kyle Trask. But are we giving that answer holding our nose, or are we energetically and forcefully giving that answer? Is Florida's offense going to be feared this year at any point? Do you think, Florida fans and otherwise, do you think that we're going to watch this team this year and wherever they peak performance-wise, are they going to have a product on the field that is really scary? I mean, that you think about 4 days before you play them and you say, how in the world are we going to stop that offensive machine they have at Florida? Who are the first-team talent guys? Like first-team all-conference types. I think you could put Trask in that conversation. Pitts, certainly not tight end. He's a star. So I don't have any question about him. But outside of that, there are good pieces here. It's certainly the cupboard is not bare. But, you know, I say all that because Dan Mullen, we're looking at him right now if you're watching on YouTube. Dan Mullen is universally thought of as one of the best play callers and one of the best offensive minds and developers in the sport. I don't disagree with any of that. My point is, if all that verifies, and if you have a shift offensively that really meshes well with what you have, not only in Kyle Trask, but also Emory Jones, who is probably going to play a pretty important role there this year too, then it doesn't matter how much preseason first-team All-SEC guys you have, because as long as you have enough talent, guys like Dan Mullen will get it done. It is his time to shine, but that also means it's Kyle Trask's time to shine. Now, you think back this time last year, and of course, we were talking about Joe Burrow and LSU. We weren't predicting them to win a national championship. Some of us were higher on them than others, but a lot of people were looking at Joe Burrow. And people close to LSU had all the confidence in the world. I, in turn, had a lot of confidence. I have people close to LSU who were annually pessimistic about any rumors of offensive improvement, and all of a sudden, the annual pessimistic crowd, I mean, they were bathing in the purple and gold Kool-Aid, and I said, these people don't normally blow smoke. They must know something, and as it turns out, they did. Joe Burrow always had the skill set. It just took the right system. Joe Burrow was also surrounded by, as it turns out, the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line and several first-round caliber wide receivers. I don't know that we necessarily have that skill set at Florida, at the quarterback position, or elsewhere. Are they good enough? Because I think a lot of comparisons being made right now between last year where LSU was and then this year where Florida was and what we should expect. Kyle Trask is probably not the mobile threat that Joe Burrow was. He doesn't have quite as efficient weapons. I don't want to say efficient because they can be very efficient at Florida. The danger factor, the pop the top off at any moment factor. I don't necessarily know that I look at Florida's offense the same way. Schedule, though, not as tough as what LSU played last year. And they're going to have some time to get whatever they're going to be right. They don't start off with 3 of their first 5 opponents being top 10 caliber. Emory Jones is a guy that the closer I get to Florida, the more you hear talked about. Nationally, Emory Jones is an afterthought. Everyone thinks Kyle Trask, he's going to take 95% of the snaps this year. Most informed Florida fans will tell you, nah, that ain't true. And truth be told, some of us, speaking for Florida fans now, think that Emory Jones has a skill set that matches what Dan Mullen ideally wants to do a lot more. Hey, I can't argue with that. With what we've seen from Dan Mullen historically, there's no conversation to be had. Certainly, Emory Jones looks like the more prototypical Dan Mullen quarterback. Now, you've got another contingent of Gator fans who would say, okay, but so was Felipe Franks on the surface, and he goes down last year, and we just had a random pivot to where not only did we put a different guy in, that guy being Kyle Trask, I mean, it seems like on the fly just changed our offense. We went like air raid principles, and it looked good with an offseason and one of the best offensive minds in college football. Like, may we see an offensive product this year that we look at and go, long term, maybe this gives us a better chance to eventually win the SEC or a national championship here than whatever, quote unquote, Dan Mullen's offense is. But when I'm looking at the quarterback position and you don't have a transcendent star, Jake Fromm is a good example this time last year. Jake Fromm I was looking at, and I was wondering, how many games is he going to have to win? How many games are they going to be in where you're trading shots with someone and it's put on the quarterback's shoulders? And so I'm looking up and down Florida's schedule, and I'm looking down the roster, to be honest with you. And if it went wrong this year, it would go wrong because, like maybe Dameon Pierce never really solidifies himself as a tier 1 SEC running back, and they can't lean on the running back position. Maybe the pass rush is not there defensively, and therefore you're asked to win more games. You shoulder a lot more of the load as the quarterback at Florida. But, Kentucky in week 2, is that a game Kyle Trask is going to have to win? At Tennessee in week 4, South Carolina at home week 5. You're going to have LSU come in there in week 6. That looks to be the first game where, if you want to call it losable, I'll call it losable. Several of these games are losable. Far crazier things have happened, but that LSU game is the one where they stand the biggest chance of maybe being a point spread underdog by the time the game happens. I know what things say right now. And then Georgia, week 9 in Jacksonville. Like, which game's there? Could it be a game that pops up that no one could have seen coming? But Kyle Trask, as much maybe guarded optimism as I have about him, if they start the season and that offense is on fire, and Florida has found their pass rush, Todd Grantham has worked a miracle down there. It's not like it's out of the realm of possibility to look at them and say, I thought Florida was going to be good. They're even better than I thought they were going to look. I thought they were going to contend in the East and probably lose to Alabama or whoever in Atlanta. I think they can beat Alabama or whoever the SEC West sends to Atlanta. That's not out of the realm of possibility. But like we said the other night, like I'll continue to say, only because I'm repeating what a lot of our Florida viewers and listeners say to me, if not 2020, then when? Now, having said that, maybe all this expectation gets packed onto Florida this year, and they finish second in the East, and then it's Emory Jones time, and it turns out all the while some of the insiders in Gainesville were right. He was the one that was the better fit all along. I don't know, several ways that things can go this year.